Teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing you've heard a student say? I had a student who had just moved to our school, 3rd grader. His first day he had this huge gash over his nose. I don't know why, but I just didn't think much of it. A couple days later I asked him what had happened and he said that his mom's boyfriend's dad pinned him against a wall and whipped him with his belt. Then showed me marks on his back as well. He kind of laughed it off and said, yeah, he's mean. It took every ounce of me not to cry right then and there. I immediately went next door to get an adult to take over my class and ran to the principal. She called the police and they had some kind of excuse why they wouldn't be able to come right away. She demanded they be there today because she was not sending that boy home. They did show up, they walked him home, and they watched as the boyfriend's dad packed up and left. The boy was in 3rd grade, had the dirtiest mouth, and was probably one of the funniest and sweetest kids I'd ever met. He did tell me that the man moved back to Samoa later that year, mom stayed with boyfriend, so knew stuff about the man. He moved schools the next year though, so I don't know how he's doing now. When I was student teaching elementary art, I was on crutches from a recent knee surgery. We were doing clay and I was staying close to a particularly violent kid. They were using rolling pins to roll out slabs, and this kid was hitting other kids. I kept shielding the kids trying to get the thing out of his hand when he finally tried to throw it. Pretty badass honestly, I snatched it out of midair and was trying to put distance between us and scolding the kid. Kid turns to me and yells, "Bitch, I'll break your other leg," and kicks me in my bad leg. Kid was 7 years old. Trying to convince a 17-year-old student that drugs are not the way to go and that he has a full life ahead of him when he says, "Doesn't matter, I'm gonna be dead or in jail by the time I'm 25. He had been told he was nothing his whole life and he absolutely believed it. Spent up until he graduated trying to prove him wrong. We saw our neighbor die last night. Completely deadpan. Me. Oh my goodness. What happened? Are you okay? Them. He was racing his lawnmower and it dragged him to death. It went really fast. Me. Are you okay? Would you like to talk to the counselor? Them. Nah, we're fine. We've seen it before. Them. Twin 7th grade boys in the Ozarks of the southern Midwest, USA. I had a student who was sweet and innocent to adults. However, when alone with other kids he would curse at them and manipulate them to do his bidding. When the other students would complain, the student would act innocent and deflect anything that was said to him. I couldn't prove anything when I expressed my concerns to mom. Mom played the victim. One day, however, I introduced Flipgrid, a video recording service for assignments, to which the student went on video and started spewing racial slurs to another student. On video, this boy exposed himself. I sent the video to our principal. Mom gets called in to have a conference, mom plays the victim again about his behavior. The student gets transferred shortly after. My dad wants to kill me with his hunting gun. 9 years old. A student once told me he was going to burn his house down. We talked about how that would ruin his house and how he could possibly hurt his mom and dad or himself. His reply was, "I'd make sure my mom was dead before I burn it down." I was teaching a high school jewelry metal shop class and some students alerted me to one student trying to sneak out some of the metal files. When confronted, he said he wanted to use them to stab people in the halls. I had him removed permanently, to say the least. Coworkers told me a sad story of a boy who had weapons in his backpack. Other students came forward one day and said, "Mrs. we think you should look in boy's backpack. There's some stuff in there that's not allowed." These boys were usually happy-go-lucky and at this time they were clearly worried themselves. Teachers found tools in the backpack which might seem chill, but there was definitely something off. Like 2 hammers and a couple of screwdrivers which had been filed down. After some discussions the sad story came to light. The boy was not in a safe home. His father, or stepfather I'm not exactly sure, was abusive to the boy and his mother. Apparently they had recently had a confrontation and the boy was sent to stay at a friend neighbor's house. He stole the tools from the workshop in that house. Pretty much grabbed anything he could in the moment he had, anything he thought he could use to defend his mom next time. This kid was 13. One of my students threatened to kill my dog while I was out walking her. This was after he had cussed me out, ripped up his work, and disturbed the class. It was his second day in class. Coached elementary PE. Had a 9-year-old student call me an infested tampon sucker. More surprised than angry. At the time I was 23 and never heard an insult like that. It wasn't a student, but his father. A guy came up to me on parents' night and told me to call him if his kid needed a good yelling, since his kid was such a useless fuck up. Well, I stood there in shock. He added, "He's always been lazy, but he's been worse since his roommate at his last school killed himself. Don't hesitate to call me if he pulls that bullshit. Fuck that guy." During a class field trip, a girl in class casually mentioned before everybody that the road we were driving down was the same one she tried to kill herself on the year before because she was bullied so badly. She said she'd been driving and flirted, hoping to hit a tree, only to change her mind because she didn't want to hurt her family. It just came out of nowhere and from the girl who was generally considered incredibly popular, kind, and well-liked.